Tightrope walking and training animals is one of the ancient circus arts. They date back millennia in Armenia. Interest among Armenians towards tightrope walking is not only determined by its leisure value, but also because Saint Karapet was its patron, who healed the sick, gave infertile spouses the possibility to conceive. I think he most probably replaced the previous deity that was the patron of wrestlers and tightrope walkers, which is why the church did not impede with their shows in the church courtyards. If there was a religious celebration of a saint, since the people liked those shows, the church invited tightrope walkers. I have some historical background, since not everyone is aware of it, and we had some sort of detrimental attitude towards tightrope walkers. So I'll start with the historical preview, and then we'll talk about their rules. Since I have worked among them, I will share some of their secrets, quote unquote. This is Arzumanyan, who unfortunately crashed during one of the last shows in the Armenian circus. The earliest data about tightrope walkers come to us from the Van Kingdom period. You see the stilts on the bronze 9 to 6 age belt. There are scenes of Barik and Tan, including acrobats. They walk on hands, do saltos, walk on stilts, and accompany. See the acrobat on hands, head down, they bring in an ox. This is a sacred scene. They also came up with well-trained animals and played acrobatic games involving animals. This was not only with the cats in Crete, but also Armenians. These bronze belts come to attest to this. Early medieval Armenian authors also refer to various theatrical shows and genres. This is already medieval illuminated manuscript with an acrobat portrait. Yeznik of Kop was angry that by training animals they changed their essence, and David the Invincible philosopher affirmed that tightrope walking and pole walking, as well as stilt walking, was neither detrimental nor a beneficial craft. In medieval Armenian illuminated manuscripts, you see many scenes depicting acrobats and trained animals. The brilliant example of this is the colophon of 1688. You can see it here. It's a manuscript with the tightrope walker as well as with zurna players. This is the testament with the preacher prayer book, and you still have a tightrope walker. This demonstrates that this was a hallowed image. This is 1688-89 manuscript of Archimandrite Aristakes. It's called Gregor the Theologist, and there is an image of a tightrope walker and musicians. This is a testimony of the continuity of the tradition of tightrope walking in Armenia. We have many references in literature of 19th century tightrope walking in many regions of Armenia. Mostly, this is not specific descriptions of it, but simply tangential references with some little detail. The biggest contribution was made by Garegin Levonyan. Public shows of tightrope walkers in Constantinople and other Armenian regions date back famous athlete Hovhannes Gasparian was called the new Hercules because of his strength, because he also took part in shows in Europe. He brought together his tightrope walker friends, and in 1846, in an open air, they made their first show. The next was the circus theater founded by Aramian and company. They worked until the end of the demise of Ones Gamparian, 20 years. There were 12 tightrope walkers and jesters. 6 were tightrope walkers and 6 were apparently jesters and clowns. Because of witness testimonies of compatriots, we have a description of their show episodes. The most famous one was the scene of the fire. They had a 10-meter long tightrope, and 2 parallel tightropes were used to play out the scene of the fire. They made this show through touring various cities. The description of this number is in Badoyan's Armenian Games publication. Now let's move on to tightrope walkers in Yerevan. These were roaming acrobats. They didn't have a permanent stage. This is Rotter's drawing that they prepared for Stepan Lisitsyan, and it was published in the Hasker journal. Then they presented to me the original. They did not have a permanent stage or platform, so this art pertained both to the city and the village. As opposed to the villages, in the towns they had more locations to choose where to put up the tightrope. This was one of the reasons why the Aramian and company made shows in Tbilisi, in Yerevan, in Poti, in Baku. They toured around. In the summer of 1850, the Gasparian company arrived in Yerevan and set up in the Tsahi Maitan Square next to the Gyurgy courtyard. This is approximately where the city hall is now. During the public show, a festive mood prevailed in the city. The tightrope was set up, and there were rugs underneath, ornate rugs. After the very difficult rehearsal, they finally came up with the show of the fire. As posters and memoirs of the witnesses come to test, Yerevan had also Little Men, Nikitin's Russian Circus, Yesikovsky Circus, the grand finale of which opened up in Yerevan. In 1926, incidentally, Bunyatian submitted a design for the circus. This is the Dirak. There is a standalone table. Most probably this is Hovhannes Gasparian, and the tightrope, he climbed the pole and played out the scene of the fire, juggling maces and bowls. So you can have a look at this. After the establishment of Soviet power, the tightrope walkers continued their show with their shows initially. So wherever there were markets or oriental bazaars, they could have gotten a lot of revenue. Since Rantar was eliminated in the Soviet time, the Rantar market, Bunyatan designed the circus where we have the current circus building now. But that was also across the road from the bazaar. The old-timers may remember that there was a kolkhoz shuka in the place of Moscow Film Theater. So the market basically state. The location seems to determine the essence. There were changes in the life of Yerevan since after the revolutionary transformations. I have met about six tightrope walkers of late. I have interviewed them and I have the relevant texts. Almost all of them give handed over to me their archives also. All of the tightrope walkers and their companies are not originally from Yerevan, but they continually had their shows in Yerevan and contributed to the cultural turnover of the city. Until most recently, it's common knowledge that all of the state celebrations, religious festivals, every district NORC or the Massive, whenever they're celebrated some sort of a festival, they always invited tightrope walkers. Almost no festivity was unaccompanied by tightrope walkers. We have just one left, Shota from Horvirab. This is his show in Athens. I took them along to various conferences, and all of the shows had a resounding success with foreign audiences. I took them to Israel. I took them to Israel. They had the show in Aleppo, twice in Athens, and their central TV featured their shows even. The names of most tightropers. This is the most recent, the last tightrope walker. What was his name? Mamikon. He recently had another show in Moscow, but he arrived urgently for some event here and put up his show. He is still a talented guy. I don't remember the names of most of them, but everyone remembers the famous Vachagan. Vachagan and his parents in 1920 during the Turkish massacres fled and came from Igdir, resettling in Hankavan, close to Armavir. This is Armavir, a hallowed place where in pagan times we already had shows, and all of a sudden the epitome of tightrope walking moves to Armavir again. Hankavan is right next to Armavir. After some time, Vachagan made acquaintance with another tightrope walker, Karapet, who is from Martakert region in Karabakh. Incidentally, in Karabakh, they had a lot of tightrope walkers. I've drawn a list. We had, in the wake of 1920s, we had about 40 tightrope walkers. Some of them were also jesters, what is called Yalanchi. There were musicians, three musicians, Zurnachi, Deholchi, and Damkash, and then one or two assistants. So the whole company is five. So there were about 160 or about 200 people involved in this community of tightrope walkers. Everyone knew each other or were even related. They knew who could put up which show numbers. And let me tell you about Vachagan. After some years of working assistant tightroper, together with Karapet was initially assistant tightroper. After going through training, he put together his own company and started his individual shows in Yerevan, Gyumri, and villages. To augment their company, Vachagan offered pro bono lessons to Aristakes and Hachik Mirzoyan, brothers from Igdir, and in the 1940s, they had a show in the Tabadipi village in the Abaran province. It's the Yeranjatach now. Vachagan noticed three boys, the Chatian brothers. When he learned that their grandfather, Sarkis Harutyunyan, lived in Khalat before 1915 and used to be a tightrope broker, Vachagan understood that this kid could carry on his profession, their grandfather's profession, and took them as his uh, students. Patvakan Hambarsum and Benjamin Mershtatyan brothers learned the craft, then they each put together their own companies from among the relatives from their own village who they trusted. Umar Shatyans, perhaps, are the ones that also to this dynasty, also Vache Umar Shatyan, piano teacher and famous instructor, is from the same dynasty. I used to take lessons from his father, Vahan Umar Shatyan. So one branch of Umar Shatyan's pursued music, and the other branch became tightrope walkers. In both cases, art was in their veins. Zhenya Khachatryan is also from the Umar Shatyan dynasty. Vachagan's name is associated with certain novelties, acrobatic number Dirak, riding a bike on the tightrope, replacing the woven one with the metal rope, and his disciple learned the Dirac number and started walking on stilts. Until 1920, how does the change in the until 1920 there was a German athlete who made shows in Yerevan. When he was about to leave, he gifted Vachagan a bicycle and a metal rope. He didn't perhaps want to take it along, so Vachagan replaced a woven rope with a metal one. And since it was impossible to walk barefoot on this metal road, he started wearing slippers, and now all tightrope walkers use sneakers, although it is torn after several shows. So this Vachagan's innovation became customary. This metal rope was used by Patvakan, by Jora Armeniakan, and when it was worn out, they went to the tram depot and asked for one there, and this one allowed them to also use a bicycle. What were the innovations? In the old times, whenever they arrived in a village after the show, the tightrope walker asked for permission from the elders, whereas now it's the city hall that they have to get the clearance. The city hall asked for a list of their numbers, attached a wet stamp to it, and they had to abide by the list. Usually, before the show, the tightrope walker asked for patron Saint Karapet and prayed. But in the 20s, in view of the anti-religious propaganda, they prohibited to recall the name of Saint Karapet, and so they no longer did. Whereas the jester addressing the public said, "Look, he's not praying, but still doesn't fall off the tightrope." And their attire also changed. His vest is no longer had no longer been decorated with batiks, the charms or amulets, and girls no longer tied their headscarves to his tools. In the old times, when they arrived in the village, they borrowed the logs in order to tighten the ropes. After the show, they returned the logs to whoever they belonged to. Over time, they replaced the logs with pipes because the tightrope wore out the logs, and they took a rubber insert from a tractor and used it to facilitate the tightening of the rope later. Since they did not have any means of transportation, the villagers usually gave them a donkey to carry the utensils, and they walked. Whereas now they have their own vehicle. They boarded the vehicle and piled up their stuff on the roof. They were had half a dozen numbers, whereas now no tightrope walker or jester Yalanchi remember those shows. In the past, they had two assistants, then two musicians and a jester, whereas now they have two musicians. Well, it boils down to money issues. The title broker only inspected the readiness of the record. Now they use also musical tracks. This was the innovation by Jora Armeniakan because he used a rundown Yerevan with a boy that he took over from an orphanage to bring up as his follower. As for the hierarchy of the relations, all of the company obeys the title brokers. Second in ranking is the first Zornachi. The jester is the last in the hierarchy, and this order is preserved to our days since the show is done in a place with no perimeter. After the third number, the jester starts to collect the cash from the viewers. In the past, the jester gave the amount to the assistant, who was the treasurer. They all together started to count the monies, whereas now they no longer trust each other. Sometimes, when they trusted, the tightrope walker and the Zurnachi counted the money together. First, they single out the common expenses, then three parts went to the musicians, one to the jester, one to the tightrope walker, and one part went to the tightrope. So basically, the walker got two shares. So when they distributed, they always said a prayer, recited a prayer. The Zurnachi did. The first Zurnachi, Masho Sultan Surp Karapet, is their patron. And let's say if the name of the tightrope walker was Armen, Armen gets two parts and we take one each. Now the relations have changed, of course. They no longer trust each other, but the old people say that was not the case in the past. So what does the jester do? The jester steals coins and hides them in his shoes because the jester's outfit has no pockets. But sometimes he still succeeds to snitch a coin or two. But if someone notices it from among the participants, the tightrope walkers beats up the jester, who only cries out loud and doesn't complain otherwise. Although the tightrope limits the range of movements, but there are still certain tricks that they use. You see one of them on screen. If they see there is less people watching, they cut down on the show. The last tightrope walker this is the very last one. Two more phrases. The tightrope walkers now usually have two platforms. One is in the circus. Sos Petrosyan invites them to the circus for official shows, and the other platform is in the street. The last one was Varshak Arzumanyan, who slid down from the cupola of the circus all the way down to the arena. That was a very original number, but unfortunately during his show in Yerevan he crashed. In Europe in the 16th century they had a similar number, not from under the circus cupola but from lateral. You can see it there, the lateral rope. From here, they just slid down. Not dangerous at all in this case. Thank you for your attention.